Madam President, 78 years ago, 4-year-old Anastasio was living in Tularosa, New Mexico, a city 40 miles away from the Trinity test detonation site. Now, little Anastasio didn't know it at the time. None of the families there did. But the world they were living in was contaminated in radioactive particles from the first nuclear test. Anastasio grew to be a big family man, hunting and growing on the land enriched by a ditch system, an acequia system that provided ample water and nourishment. Great-grandparents, grandparents, mom and dads, children, and babies, all eating and drinking contaminated food, water sources. Later in life, Anastasio Cordova developed prostate cancer and tongue cancer. The cancer metastasized to his neck and throat before becoming inoperable and consuming his body. His daughter, Tina, recalls him being only 125 pounds at the time of his death in 2013. Today, March 7th, 11 years ago on this day, Anastasio left us. For Anastasio's family, this was just one heartbreak from a long list of family members who've died or became seriously ill from radiation exposure. Tina Cordova, Anastasio's daughter, made it her life's mission to fight for justice, compensation for her family and the thousands of victims of our nation's nuclear weapons program. This is Tina. Rosalie's holding her. Tina's with us today. Bernice Gutierrez is here with us as well. Henrietta from Tularosa, New Mexico. And Beatrice Gutierrez and her friends at a very young age. Now, Tina will be my guest tonight at this year's State of the Union. And I'm honored to have her by my side in this cause. Let me change that. I'm honored that she allowed me on this journey with her to help other people. Now, she was with me in Belen, New Mexico, when the President of the United States, Joe Biden, was visiting to talk about some of the incredible opportunities that have been created for economic growth. But when I was speaking before the President, I saw Tina in the audience. And I spoke momentarily about the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act and about her, only to be surprised that when the President of the United States followed me, he looked at Tina and looked at everyone in the room and the cameras and said, "You have my support to get this done." Yesterday, the President of the United States issued a statement, a SAP, showing support for the passage of this legislation, the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act amendments. In addition to language that Senator Josh Hawley has included in bringing attention to families that need help and need to be seen and heard and deserve compensation based on storage, flaws, and exposure to each and every one of them. This is truly a bipartisan piece of legislation, an effort, reaching out to colleagues in both chambers, every one of our friends, asking them to take a hard look at this. Please give us a chance. Let us earn your support. Not long ago, when Senator Hawley had an amendment with this language in it, Oppenheimer was hitting theaters across America and everyone was talking about it. A film that was made in New Mexico. Some people may recognize this from that film. 62 U.S. senators that day stood up and raised their hand and said, yes, the United States needs to move forward, take responsibility, give recognition to all of these families across America. Unfortunately, it was not included in the National Defense Authorization Act. Well, on Sunday, there's something happening in America called the Oscars. And there's a lot of incredible actors and actresses that will be recognized because of the story they told with Oppenheimer. That story left out an important part. The families that we're here fighting for today. And while many of them will receive Oscars, no doubt, I hope none of those actors and actresses that are up giving their remarks when they receive an Oscar for telling the story of Dr. Oppenheimer, that they forget about these families, that they think about them. And the same advocacy that I've heard from many of these incredible artists, I hope one of them is willing to say something, but if not, I hope they reflect on it. Now, I'll close by saying this. This particular legislation is not just about New Mexico or Missouri. This legislation will help our brothers and sisters in Arizona, Colorado, Idaho, Montana, Nevada, across New Mexico, Utah, and Guam. It will provide more support to uranium mine workers in Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Wyoming, Utah, Colorado, Arizona, Texas, North Dakota, and South Dakota, reaching out to our brothers and sisters in Missouri, in Tennessee, in Alaska, and in Kentucky. We have to get this done. Now, I want to add that since this bill has been scheduled for a vote, I've heard from more colleagues about their communities that have been harmed by our nation's complicated nuclear legacy, specifically people in Pike and Cited, out in Ohio, Armstrong County, Pennsylvania, and communities near the Hanford site in Washington have been exposed to radiation, and they deserve justice too. Senator Brown, Senator Casey, Senator Murray, and Senator Cantwell. You have my commitment that as this effort moves through the legislative process, I will work with you to also deliver justice for your constituents so we can work as a family. And Madam President, as I close, I ask all my colleagues to please take a look at this. Please reflect. 62 votes on the first vote. I hope we can send a message to all those advocates and families across America that they are heard and seen, and that we'll see a stronger showing this afternoon. Generations of families wiped out by lung, stomach, prostate, thyroid, skin, breast, and tongue cancer didn't get the glossy Hollywood treatment. And the United States Congress has not made any significant progress in correcting these injustices since 2000. Shame on us. A lot of us have been praying about this. and reflecting on this. And I certainly hope that we have a resounding vote in just a few short minutes to show our American brothers and sisters that we love them too. I yield back.
Senator from Missouri.
Madam President, in March of 1865, President Lincoln said this: "Let us strive on to finish the work, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan." Madam President, that's why we're here today. We're here today to continue the work, to finish the work, to honor the lives of those who have borne this nation's battles, who have rallied to this nation's flag in every hour of danger, the people who won World War II, who won the Cold War, who helped rebuild Europe and Japan and our allies, the people who have built this country and are now waiting for us to help them. That's what we're about today. There's a reason, Madam President, that we succeeded over the last half century. It's because the working people of this country in Missouri and in New Mexico and in Nevada and Colorado and Idaho and Texas and Wyoming and everywhere else from coast to coast, it's because the working people of this country went to the uranium mines for our nuclear program, went to the processing sites to make our weapons, volunteered for our Army, went overseas to fight, or just raised their families with dignity and honor. That's why we have a United States of America. That's why we are the United States of America. But we have not done right by those good people. We have turned our back on them because so many of them, Madam President, were poisoned by their own government, by nuclear waste and radiation, by nuclear tests that were done without their knowledge, by the nuclear material and the mines that they weren't told about. The government exposed them over a period of decades to nuclear radiation and waste, and in almost every case, did nothing about it. In many cases, lied to them about it. Well, this isn't right, Madam President. This isn't just. That's why we are here today. It's the pride of this nation that when we won the Second World War, when we won the Cold War, we rebuilt the lands of our former enemies. I'm proud of that as I ever have been. But now it is time to rebuild these communities. It is time to finish the work in the United States of America. It is time to turn to the men and women who have borne the brunt of the battle. The men and women who gave their health, and in many cases their lives, for their nation. That's what we're here for today on the floor. This isn't about a handout. This isn't about some kind of welfare program. This is about doing basic justice by the working people of this nation, whom their own government has poisoned. This is the day when we break the cycle of lies from the government, when we break the cycle of passing the buck and irresponsibility from the government, when we say to the people of America, we will honor you. When we say to the working people of this country, we are here for you. When we acknowledge to these Americans, you built this country, we will honor you. That's why we're here today. The Senate has a chance today to make right what has been wrong, to right 50 years of wrongs, 50 and 60 years of Americans ignored, exploited, and lied to. Today, we can begin to right those wrongs. That's why we're here, Madam President. I want to recognize now my friend, my colleague from the great state of Missouri, a man who grew up in the St. Louis region, right by one of these nuclear processing facilities and the landfill where the government dumped the waste and then lied about it. A man I'm proud to have in this fight, Senator Eric Schmitt.
Madam President.
Senator from Missouri.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise today along with my friends from New Mexico and my colleague who've shown great leadership in this to defend and support the people who've been impacted, who quite literally have been poisoned by their own government. As was mentioned, I grew up in Bridgeton, Missouri. Bridgeton is ground zero, the epicenter of some of the waste that was dumped, the hazardous, the toxic, the radioactive waste that was dumped there. And just to take a step back, after World War II, St. Louis, the city itself, was the main population center. St. Louis County, which lies to the west of St. Louis City, had a lot of open land, a lot of opportunity. And the folks coming back from World War II who wanted to start a better life found that American dream in St. Louis County, where I grew up. And as they traveled west to places like Bridgeton and other zip codes that are now included in this bill, something else was following them. Something else was headed west. And it was this radioactive waste that they had no idea. No idea was in their water, below their feet, affecting them, poisoning them, and killing them. And I think back, my parents still live there, by the way, but I think back to those friends and those neighbors I had. And as Senator Hawley mentioned, these are folks, these are the waitresses, these are the truck drivers, these are the hairstylists, these are people who go to work every single day, and they just want a better life for their kids. They might teach in that local school. They were creating these communities that were new. But again, their government had dumped toxic materials that were poisoning them. And what they wanted, again, was to live the American dream. By no fault of their own, they happened to live in an area, whether they were downwind or whether it was in their water, that has impacted their not just their lives, but their families and generations of their families. And this legislation, it won't make them whole, but it's some measure of compensation. It is some measure of justice. And I know that some people have talked about cost. Look, we do a lot of things here. We spend a lot of money. And we can debate on whether or not that's worth it or not, or these are our priorities. But I think if we took off the red jerseys and we took off the blue jerseys and really focused on what we should really be doing here, in a government that is supposed to have limited powers, one of the things that we should be doing is protecting our own citizens. And that's what this vote is about. It's living up to the promise that we made to the people when we got elected, which was that we were going to fight for them. And this is an opportunity to go do that. It is the ability in a number of zip codes and in states across this country for people that worked there, who helped, Senator Hawley mentioned, who helped build America back up, or were working to save, civilization in many ways in the middle of the last century. It's for us to make sure we're doing everything we can to see that some measure of justice is served. And so I would just ask my fellow colleagues to look within their hearts, or imagining looking in the eyes of some of the people who are here today who've been impacted. Because these folks don't have powerful lobbyists. The people that come to our offices asking about something that's in some bill, the people who've been affected, they don't have those powerful forces at play. This is something that has bubbled up in a bipartisan way, again, to support the people that we represent that have been impacted. And I am proudly a supporter of this, and will do everything I can to help get this passed so that these folks get the justice that they deserve. And with that, I'll yield back the floor. Thank you, Madam President.
Madam President, when I have come to this floor in weeks and months past to talk about this cause, because it's more than an issue, it is a cause. It's a cause of justice. It's a cause of doing right by our fellow Americans. When I've come in weeks past, I've often shown the pictures and told the stories of people who have given their health or given their lives for their country. Today, I don't have any pictures with me, because today in the gallery, we have Missourians themselves, and New Mexicans themselves, and Arizonans themselves, and members of the Navajo Nation themselves. They're here right now They're sitting right there, traveling from great distances. And I just want to call out a few of their names. Mary Dixon's here from Utah. Sherry Hanna's here from Arizona. Laura Greenwood is here from Texas. Phil Harrison is here, and Leslie Begay, and Rose Harrison, and Tina Cordova, all from New Mexico. And Linda Perez has come all the way from Guam. All the way from Guam. Tona Henderson has come from Idaho, and Paula Terry also. And from the great state of Missouri, Don Chapman, who will be my guest tonight at the State of the Union, and Karen Nickel, and Ashley, and Kristen, and Chantel, and Tricia Burns are all here. And from the Navajo Nation, Justin and Kyle, and there are more in the gallery as well, Madam President. From all over this country, representing every segment of this country, representing the great heritage of this country, representing the great communities of this country. I think of the Navajo Nation. 50% of the uranium that was mined in this country for our nuclear program, half of it came from the Navajo Nation, the workers of the Navajo Nation, who, if I'm not mistaken, also volunteer for this nation's armed services at a percentage higher than any other community in America. These folks represent here today the best of our nation. They are America. They're here. They're here for us to honor them. You know, as Americans, we make a commitment to each other. It's what it means to be an American. We promise that we will live by the ideals that we hold together and by the things that we love together. And we promise to stand by one another. This is about standing by one another. This is about seeking that justice that President Lincoln spoke about so many marches ago. And now on this March Day in the year 2024, the United States Senate has the opportunity to do its part, its small part, to continue to make this nation what it could be, what we promised it will be, and to put right things that have been wrong. I'll end with this, Madam President. As we speak, the government is testing under the homes in St. Louis, under people's basements in St. Louis, for radioactive contamination. After saying for decades there was no contamination to be concerned about, there was nothing that we should worry about, now they're testing in our homes. They've already shut down schools. The water in the creeks is contaminated. The landfills are contaminated. The soil has been contaminated. Today we say enough. Today we turn the page. Today we begin something new. And so for those folks who are watching now from Missouri, whether from their living rooms, while their homes are being tested, or in the high schools while they're hoping for something better, let's see the United States Senate at work. Let's see what we can do to keep the promises we have made to each other as Americans. And so with that, Madam President, I yield all remaining debate time.